Let's talk about commas. They are the shortest mark of punctuation. They're the most often used. They're also the most confusing because there's more rules about them and more exceptions to those rules. So one of the major things I want you to do with commas is read as writers. Pay attention when you see commas used. Notice how they're used and notice how that they're indicating most of the time little hesitations, little pauses, and little interruptions in the flow of the sentence. So we call these pauses between terminal pauses. Now, a terminal pause is one that ends something. So periods and semicolons, these are the marks of punctuation we use at the ends of sentences. So these are called terminal pauses. Okay. Now, some of the commas that are some of the one of the most popular uses of commas is to separate items in a list, and this could be a list of anything that can be put in compound forms such as nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. These can have commas between them. So we look at nouns. I read books, stories, and essays. I read one, I read two, I read three things. Now, the moment I say I read books and stories, I don't need a comma there because there's not really a pause here. So I really want to stress that commas are about pauses. Most of the time, a pause is indicated by a comma, and most of the time you can hear the pause of the comma, even if it's a tiny one. Most of the time you can hear it. So one of the things you want to work on is being more alert to the pauses you actually make. We do make these pauses, and because we make these pauses, we do speak them, and we do write the punctuation. So I read books, stories, and essays. You hear that tiny little pause between books and stories, and the shorter one between stories and essays. Another list is of verbs. I read, write, and research in college. I do one, two, three things, and the moment I do more than one thing, there's a chance I'm going to have a pause there. But you listen to it again and you hear that pause. I read, write, and research in college. Adjectives. I am diligent, dedicated, and grumpy worker. I am a diligent, dedicated, and grumpy worker. Now notice, I have to separate with my voice diligent from dedicated because they're two different things. And when we speak, we naturally pause there. And very often what happens with writers is they forget that the reader doesn't hear them. Okay. When we are speaking, we can make these pauses on our own. We would naturally make those pauses on our own, and we are going to indicate this with our voices. Well, when we're reading on the page, we don't have the pauses. We don't hear them. The commas are the way to let the reader hear that short pause that is there for that comma. So listen to that again. I am a diligent, dedicated, and grumpy worker. Good kind of worker. Adverbs. I finished the essay quickly, effectively, and marvelously. Now, I want you to notice with all four of these, nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs, there's still the same sort of pause, that sort of little hesitation around it. And that's the hesitation that indicates that these are different items in a list. Okay. Now, one of the major problems with the comma is the question of the Oxford comma. By a problem, I should say it's just a debate. Okay, there are some people say absolutely you have to use the Oxford comma, which is the comma after the second last item in the list. So all the examples in that above have the Oxford comma. I read books, stories. The Oxford comma is the comma after stories. I read, write, and research. Okay, the Oxford comma is the comma after write. I am a diligent, dedicated, and grumpy worker. The Oxford comma is the one after dedicated. And I finished the essay quickly, effectively, and marvelously. The Oxford comma is the comma after effectively. Now, we don't have a lot of time to go into it, but I want you to notice when you're reading as writers how many writers will use the Oxford comma and many don't. It's a matter of style. Now, I do notice I tend in my own writing not to use Oxford comma, and I know that people who use the Oxford comma tend to be more judgy. That's just because they've got their own issues that they're working through. Okay, and we need to be patient with them. Okay. So the Oxford comma is something to be on the lookout for. Notice how many people write it, and many people don't. It's a stylistic thing. Now, one of the most important things that's going to happen with commas is that commas indicate parenthetical words. Now, words and phrases. Now, this is something I want you to keep in mind. Parenthetical, parenthetical, parenthetical. So what the word parenthetical means is it is structurally unnecessary. You can cut it out and still have the sense. So, for example, in the dependent clause in the example right beneath that, if you say looking around, I feel happy. I can cut out looking around and I still have a sense. I cannot cut out I feel happy because that's got the subject, the verb, and the object. Looking around, I feel happy. Looking around is parenthetical. Okay, it's parenthetical. I can cut it out. I don't need it. Okay, so when I do that, I make a pause with my voice. So listen to this again. Looking around, I feel happy. Looking around, I feel happy. Did you hear that little pause right around here? I make that pause naturally, but very often we forget that we're making that pause naturally. Okay, we forget that we're making that pause naturally when we write. Okay, and one thing I want you to really think about is that you can punctuate and you can write much better if you think about writing as speaking on the page. It's not the exact same thing, but it's pretty close. It's essentially a more formalized, a more systematic method of speaking. But aside from that, you use all the same basic things. We make pauses, we hesitate, we do all these different things. We even speak in ellipses. All these different marks of punctuation that we have are simply marks on the page to indicate pause, length of pause, and tone of voice of pause. That's all they are. So another method of parentheticality is in the following. You, however, will not listen. The sentence is, you will not listen. You, however, will not listen. Now, notice what my voice did around however. This whole thing here has its own hesitation. You, however, will not listen. It's almost like there's a little dip that my voice goes through. You, however, will not listen. Well, that's something separate. It's parenthetical. I can cut out the however, and I still have my sentence. You will not listen. It can sometimes even be longer, as in many people, especially good ones, root against the Pittsburgh Steelers. My real sense here is many people root against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, obviously, if I say many people root against the Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't have to say that these people are good people, because obviously if they root against the Steelers, they are good people. But sometimes we need to nail down things a little bit more nailable than they need to be. And then there are compound sentences. Now, a compound, complex, and simple are the three types of sentences. We'll talk about that elsewhere. But anytime I use the word compound in any grammatical context, what I mean is I'm taking two or more of this and making them into one. So I feel happy could be a sentence. I'm going to celebrate could be a sentence. But if I make it a compound sentence, I make it a compound sentence by putting a full sentence, a comma, a coordinating conjunction, okay, which is and another full sentence. I feel happy and I'm going to celebrate. Now you want to listen to this pause here, right here. I've got this independent clause and I've got this independent clause. Okay. Both of those could be their own sentences. But what I have between them is I have this coordinating conjunction. Okay. And I have it here to indicate that there's a pause, and their pause is happening because I have those two independent clauses. Now, there are a lot of other elements that lead to commas and a lot more complex things that are involved in it, but these are the root reasons that we use commas. Okay, so you can take these, you can apply them, you can take a look at them and apply them in a lot of different ways. But the number one thing I want you to do is recognize the pause, the length of pause, and the tone of voice pause, and recognize when you're reading that you want to pay attention not only to what people are saying, but to the punctuation they're using. If you're having trouble with punctuation, take punctuation into account when you're reading. You do this, and you should be absolutely fine. Okay.